thank you so much, Richard. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I think Rick Chua put it very well. It's nice to come here and work with colleagues and leave with them being friends. So whether it's Darla and Austin, Katrina and Quinn, so many of you who I'm getting to know now, I look forward to working with you in these areas and having fun with you in these areas for many years to come. So I'm also very cognizant of the fact that I'm what is keeping you from going out into the beautiful outdoors and from lunch. So in looking at the program that Rick had put together and the topic he assigned me, I have really just two goals in this talk. I want to talk about what I think is a new level of responsibility that we have as neurosurgeons in this profession that we love, and also to kind of bring it home, as Rick says, by summarizing all the opportunities to meet that new duty or responsibility that we now have. And one of the things that you've been starting to see as the morning has gone on is that there's some repetition of what's going on. That's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, because I think that what we're seeing is that this very successful neurosurgery embrace of the global surgery effort is highly matrixed, so that some of us are the conductor of the symphony of one effort, and others are playing the strings, but then in another area of global neurosurgery, we may be the conductor, and the former conductors are playing the strings, and that is what is going to deliver repetition and reliability, as Allison says, which is what we need to take these efforts from being at a risk of being medical neocolonialism and make them truly efforts that are going to change the world. So with that, let me just get started. So thank you. I am sorry that I didn't have the Super Wounds photo, but next time I give this talk, I'll try to insert it. I love that. But Richard, what a great example of that you have made for all of us. And I'm really honored to be part of it. So you've all seen this slide. This is the task that we as a discipline have in front of us, that there are 5 million unmet neurosurgical operations every year and 23,000 additional neurosurgeons. So that feels like a new problem, and the globalism of it feels new as well. But in fact, we are a 100-year-old specialty, and it was William Mayo who in 1919, after hearing Harvey Cushing give a talk, stood up and said, "Gentlemen," Marie, it was a gentleman at that time, "Gentlemen, we have just witnessed the birth of a new specialty, neurological surgery." So neurosurgery isn't new. We're in our second 100 years. Nor is globalism. If you look at who have been our great leaders and who have really, by their careers, pushed the specialty forward, you can look at the names, or if you're an amateur vexillologist like I am, you can look at the flags, but you can see that it's not just North America leading the way. There have been many nations that have really colored the way we think of modern neurosurgery today. So volunteering in neurosurgery, and I've included this dictionary definition because I knew that we had lawyers in our midst as well, and wanted to be sure that that was mentioned. But in fact, neurosurgeons have always done things that were volunteer, which is defined as not entering into a transaction without a legal obligation to do so, or by some definitions, not being paid to do so. But here's a central point that I want to make, and then hopefully be able to back it up with examples, and that is that the new thing that's happening, the reason why there's never been a better time to be involved in global neurosurgery is because we as a discipline have taken on an enhanced definition of what it is to be a neurosurgeon. And so now beyond just taking the best possible care of that patient who is in front of us day after day, week after week, now we also consider it a core duty of being a neurosurgeon to advocate for access to high-quality neurosurgical care for everyone, everywhere. And I'd like to give some examples of why I really think that change in culture has started to occur in our profession. So global neurosurgery, as you can see, is a rapidly emerging focus of practice for many neurosurgeons, both individuals and departments. This picture is taken from that wild Cornell Symposium that's been referred to. And look at these handsome fellows and ladies. This is the great benefit that we have at the AANS, in that our past presidents and our current president, Chris Shaffrey, have all been visionary leaders and global champions, and they have shown by example time and time again that being a good neurosurgeon goes way beyond the immediate task or patient at hand, but it involves advocacy for access to high-quality neurosurgical care for everyone. There has been a major increase in global neurosurgery publications. We'll get back to this again and again. And it starts with our core publications, Journal of Neurosurgery Publishing Group, but it extends beyond that so that our heroes like Ben Worf are collecting data that's changing not only neurosurgical practice, but pediatric practice. Things are being published in New England Journal. Our activities as a discipline at the World Health Assembly now are published each year in the Journal of Neurosurgery. Our readership, our colleagues care about what's going on in this area. This is a publication that we have that just came out this month, which is a systematic review of neurosurgical care in low-income countries. And it's phenomenal to see, if you can see just our illustration on the left from that publication, how many more publications are coming from low and middle income countries. So although it's still only 97% of the total output, it's growing dramatically, as you can see, and it will continue to do so. Our figure 4 on the right are those areas that have a very small number of neurosurgical care publications. And as a result of doing this project, we've identified 15 countries that have never published a paper on neurosurgical care of their population. So we are now systematically going through those countries and finding a way to publish what is going on in that country so that the map of the world will not have blanks on it. Our first paper on Somaliland is coming out this year, and we will systematically go through it. Now, many of those countries are war-torn. We don't want to put people at risk, but we will find a way to report on neurosurgical care all over the world. And this is important for us to recognize that just because we, as a discipline, aren't practicing somewhere doesn't mean there aren't neurosurgical problems or that no one is taking care of them. It just means they're not trained neurosurgeons who are doing that. So that, again, becomes part of our responsibility. If we know that there are places where there are no neurosurgeons, we also know that there is neurosurgical care going on to some degree, and we have a responsibility to increase the access, increase the quality for everyone everywhere. I'm very proud to be on the steering committee of the NIHR, which funded the GNOS study, and this is an example of this type of activity where we're looking at a snapshot of cranial trauma care world over, and what this is going to demonstrate to us is having collected 1 month of operative cranial trauma data from anyone, anywhere who could collect it reliably. We'll be able to get, for the first time ever, a snapshot not of how trauma is taken care of in Chicago or Washington or Salt Lake or Madison, but how is it being cared for everywhere, and get some sense of where we should be putting limited resources in order to improve access and outcomes for everyone everywhere. Well, there does seem to be a recurring theme that Canadians contribute a lot in this regard. Marie Long is from there. Bill Caldwell is from there. Jim Rutkin, I probably don't know about others in the audience as well, but of the many great things that Jim Rutka has done for neurosurgery in the course of his impressive career, one of the most important relating to what we're talking about today is that as chairman of surgery at the University of Toronto, he developed a track to full tenured professor in global surgery. So a global neurosurgeon, a global orthopedist, a global ENT person can do this as part of their, the woof and warp of the fabric of their professional life. We all know that if you're doing global neurosurgery on your vacation time and on your own nickel, it can never be the enterprise that it needs to be. And so Jim is willing to share that with those who wanted to follow their example, and I think it's a fine example for all of us. So the point that I'm making is that we can all be global neurosurgeons. We can even do it without leaving home, and people can even support the global neurosurgery effort without being neurosurgeons. On the next part of the talk, I just want to share examples of that. So how do you do it without leaving home? Some people say to me, you know, that's fine for you, but, you know, I just don't like going to a place where you don't have a hot shower, or I can't travel because of an illness or someone at home. Well, there's lots of ways. So you can be a host for international students and fellows. You can harness the internet, as many have mentioned, and do web-based teaching, conferences, webinars, journal clubs. You can be a writing or a publishing coach. One of the big problems, and it's one that, you know, relates to the people-to-people aspect that Farouk was identifying with. They have the data, they have the experience, but if English is your second language, it's really hard to physically write a paper that's going to get accepted. Every one of us can help with that. We can be medical center champions and participate in fundraisers. We can be academic champions, as Jim Rutka has shown the way. Global assurance and improvement. You can be an oral board examiner. You can help establish or support routine M&M, which we are used to and everybody needs to be used to so that quality remains high. And you can participate in many of the committees that we've referred to. There are so many ways through the internet, through simulation, for people from distant parts and LMIC parts of the world to be able to participate in this effort and to build their skills. So these are just pictures from 3 sim centers that I was easily able to visit while at Geneva for the World Health Association annual meeting. So whether you go to Lausanne, Switzerland, or right there in Geneva, or in Milan, there are just so many ways that we can share technology and share know-how using the internet. But there are also ways that those who are not even neurosurgeons, but who care about the brain, spine, and peripheral nerves and the care of patients who have those problems can be involved. So there are a lot of general surgeons who are cross-training so that they can safely treat head trauma because they're the only ones who are there. Hospital personnel, God love the nurses that we work with who love being able to save and donate the extra supplies that we so foolishly waste in every operation that we do. Hospital administrators who love to be able to donate used capital equipment and amortize that. Philanthropists, and Phoenix has had a remarkable track record in being able to fundraise for important numbers of highly valued fellowships and observerships. Bankers and lending organizations. I've had the pleasure of being able to become friends with Jim Kim, the past president of the World Bank, who is now a principal in Global Infrastructure Structures, Inc. And so they control $16 billion in assets, and in the course of looking at attractive loans for sovereign nations to build hydroelectric plants and airports, they're also looking at key parks, and soaps. And they want to know, well, if you, country X, want attractive terms to build your railway system, let's just see how far along the line you are in your end soap for your country. And all of a sudden, we have very important levers to make a difference. Trustees of universities, some of you are, or you know people who are, get them to invest in global surgery programs. Grateful patients and the opportunity to give back. There are so many ethically driven industry partners at this very meeting who are giving a lot. And as Key Park has pointed out, that can quickly become a many hundreds of billions of dollars benefit to you. How great to be able to do well by doing good. And then finally, wellness advocates. We all are aware of the wellness efforts that are going on at our hospitals, at our universities. And now there are early data that show that volunteerism actually helps prevent and treat burnout. You know, it's so interesting what Farouk was saying about how people will complain we're all guilty, I'm guilty of, about the electronic medical record, and we're not paid enough. And yet, what lifts our spirits and helps us get back on track? It's going somewhere where we're not paid and working too hard, but it reconnects us with our roots, and it's really important. So we've learned from other disciplines, and it's important, as proud as I am of the leadership that neurosurgery has taken, and we really are the specialty that's leading the global surgery effort, thanks to many of the people in this room. But we work together with other specialties, and we must work with all of them and learn from what they're doing. So the American College of Surgeons, now nearly 10 years ago, started a course in humanitarian surgery, which they now teach at their annual meeting. Stanford University picked it up, and they did that. And now we have it in neurosurgery as well, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The American College of Surgeons also has a model that maybe we'll want to consider, and that is, as a specialty, their professional association, after an extensive RFP process throughout Africa, selected Hawassa University in rural Ethiopia to be their training site. And now 13 universities in North America have committed to sending 2 board-certified general surgeons for 4 weeks each, so that this budding training program and regional center of excellence has the 24/7 participation of academic general surgeons from the United States under the auspices of the American College of Surgeons. So I traveled there with them just last month in December with the president of the American College and the person responsible, just to see if this is part of the mosaic that neurosurgery should be thinking about. I think, just as an aside, solving these problems, or at least narrowing the gap between the now and our ideal, is probably not going to be one program. It's like the cure for cancer. There's not going to be one thing. It's going to be some type of mosaic of things where everyone can contribute. And so maybe that should be part of it. We also need to recognize that faith-based groups play a big role in healthcare, as they have for millennia and always will. So how can we, in a very inclusive way, enter into productive relationships with faith-based groups like Solidarity Bridge, who actually were the sponsors of the first neurosurgical boot camp in Bolivia and are now working in Paraguay. So they're very interesting models. You've seen this slide already of Jim Kim, who, who would have thought that the president of the World Bank would be an important and interesting Cushing orator for neurosurgery, but that shows how global neurosurgery has become. Industry has supported us tremendously. So here we are running a transfemoidal boot camp in Abuja, Nigeria, but leveraging our contacts in the United States with Stryker so that we are able to have absolutely everything available in Abuja that Bill and I have had in our 15 years of running pituitary courses for the AANS annual meeting together. Now, those who we can choose to be global neurosurgeons, super wounds makes it fun for all of us to think about doing good and having fun while we're doing it. And, we don't have to wear hair shirts to do this. There's nothing that says you can't have fun while you're also helping people. In fact, if you have fun, it's more likely to be sustainable and repeated. So, you can be a global neurosurgeon who does travel. You can be one who loves field work. You can be one who doesn't love field work. You can do both. So, a few examples of those. So these are our two pediatric colleagues who started Intersurgeon, William Harkness on your left from the UK and Jim Johnson from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. They had this great idea to create a Tinder for pediatric neurosurgeons so that they could share those who had resources and are willing to share, and those who needed resources and needed to find out who those contacts should be. So they started this as a pediatric neurosurgical effort, and then they approached me and said, we want to make this an adult neurosurgery thing. So I came on as the global champion for adult neurosurgery because they had to have some way to be able to vet people who appeared on there. And then since that time it's grown. We now have a urology platform. We have an NGO platform. So it's growing by leaps and bounds, and it's been partially funded now by the G4 Alliance. So just a word about the G4 Alliance. I mentioned earlier that we neurosurgeons cannot and do not operate or do any of our work in a hospital in a vacuum. We need all of those partners who share the critical care spaces of a hospital with us. So we need people in the emergency department, in the critical care areas, we need anesthesia, and so it is essential that we always work with them because in most cases, as we're advancing global neurosurgery, it cannot advance without the support and cooperation with these colleagues. So G4 stands for the so-called SOTA specialties, so surgery, obstetrics, trauma, and anesthesia. And in fact, obstetricians do the highest number of surgical procedures of any surgical subspecialty. So G4 Alliance is 80-plus member organizations that are in a federation. So the World Federation of Neurosurgical Societies is one member. And so there are 80-plus members who are working together to try to support one another's efforts and then to band together facing the World Health Organization and other global leaders. Here's a shout out to some of the other groups. Key might want to look up and see his photo there. He's created a tremendous group with John Mira, both of whom I respect, and we love the next generation of global neurosurgeons who are really, truly going to change the world. It's been my pleasure and privilege to be the chairman of the WHO committee of the WFNS for the last 3 years, and we've gone from the occasional neurosurgeon who would occasionally drop in to the WHO office if they happen to be in Geneva to now a committee of nearly 80 participants, 20 neurosurgeons who on their own nickel go to Geneva every year for the world's biggest healthcare meeting, which is the World Health Assembly. And then our activities there each year are published in Journal of Neurosurgery. So we're starting to hit some of those metrics that Dr. Park is talking about. FEANS, you've heard from our chairman. FEANS has been around for many years, having been started in 1969, but new life has been breathed into it, and many people are involved in the coordination and the actual volunteering that this involves. Here we are at the Cornell Symposium sharing best practices. Well, The Mazama Spine Summit is kind of like that, the Western version for 2020. And we're planning a similar one. These ripple effects are heard around the world. And the European Association of Neurosurgical Societies is eager to do the kinds of things that we've been doing in North America. So a very similar symposium is planned for May 15th this year in Geneva. And finally, as I start to wrap up a little bit, I wanted to just share a sample presentation of what we're doing to try to collect data on what is going on in the rest of the world. We are also siloed. We're enthusiastic about our own activities, but very often we can make them more reliable and more sustainable if we just know that someone else is going to the same place later in the year or has solved the same problem that we're facing. So each of the 5 continental associations of the WFNS has been charged with collecting what is going on in terms of global exchanges in your own area. So here, for example, is just a partial look at the academic twinning programs that were reported in North America that are doing something outside of North America. And you can see there's a whole host, and every week I could add another one. But just to highlight a couple, so you have, the long-term association between University of Miami and Haiti, and David Sandberg, who is now in Houston, just won last year's AANS award for his devotion over 2 decades to going to Haiti. Extraordinary efforts, and they're now building a hospital there. Or Sarah Woodrow, who's just gone to the Cleveland Clinic and negotiated at Cleveland Clinic and at every place she's ever worked for having time off to go to Ethiopia, where Dr. Sarah, Professor Sarah, has trained all of the spine surgeons there, and I just had the pleasure of being there with her for her 14th trip to that institution. Or even some of my colleagues at George Washington University were so committed to helping with their program in Vietnam that for the Cornell Symposium they appeared online because they were in Hanoi during that week. Or one of my professors from my days as an intern who has put his whole, 401k into mobile surgical units and is trying yet another model of how do you get care, treatment, even a prevention message to the farthest peoples first. So, Richard, you don't know this, but I've shown this slide and another picture of you all around the world because there are places where people who are in independent institutes think that Global Neurosurgery is for academic centers that have millions of dollars. And I've said there are people who are in solo practice or in group practices who are changing the world. You are chief among them. Our professional associations are making a tremendous effort in this regard. So these are the problems that we face, and one of the things that we thought might be useful is to look at how do we take those that group of neurosurgeons who are interested in global neurosurgery and give them the skills they feel they need to be able to help out. I'm going to quickly slip through this. So we developed a program based on the template that the American College of Surgeons had developed and taught the first course at the AANS last year that was in the science of practice. It's a global neurosurgical practice course. And we were given 32 slots, 57 people showed up. And this is some of the information we want to know about who is it in the AANS who takes a course like this and wants to become involved. And I'll just draw your attention to 2 of the data points we got. One is, how old are you? What is your current role in neurosurgery? And we had a 50-50 split exactly between those who had been in practice 2 years or more and those who had been in practice more than 30 years. So the great large numbers of neurosurgeons who want to get involved, at least in traveling globally, are the younger and those who have retirement on their horizon. And then the other encouraging thing is this slide down at the bottom. Have you been involved in global neurosurgery before? And fully 50% had not. So I've already referenced that we'll be having this same kind of symposium in Geneva, but even if you never want to do any field work at all, you can be involved in improving quality. And I have now a 3-year commitment to being on the board of examiners of COSEXA, and it's a great privilege to be able to, as we did last month, certify 112 neurosurgeons for sub-Saharan Africa. Our government is involved. We have 2 neurosurgery residents who are serving Fogarty Fulbright fellowships, and they want more. Our RRC is very involved and are helping us make it easier to do this, having recently made it allowable for neurosurgery residents to be able to do international rotations for credit. So I'll conclude just by saying I hope I've been able to make the case that not only me but all of neurosurgery is embracing this concept that we have an additional responsibility, and it is to advocate for access to quality neurosurgery for everyone, everywhere. And in so doing, we can all be global neurosurgical volunteers. Thanks so much.